introduce the author of Crazy About Money, Dr. Maggie Baker. Maggie got her master's in psychology from Temple University and her Ph.D. in child development and clinical evaluation from Bryn Mawr College. She has worked in her own private practice along with her late husband for the last 32 years. She is the author of a number of academic psychology papers, and in 2011, she authored Crazy About Money: How Emotions Confuse Our Money Choices and What to Do About It. Whew, I can't wait to read this. Since then, she has appeared in Psychology Today, Forbes, CNBC, The New York Times, Savvy Money, The Wall Street Journal, Women's World, and more. Please give me a warm welcome for Dr. Maggie Baker.
I am delighted to be here today, to be with all of you, and I appreciate your time and your attention for what I'm going to say, which is all about money. I love to see it pile up just like anybody else, but that's not my passion. My passion is helping people understand their relationship to money, the beliefs, the attitudes, and the emotions that are embedded in our money. And I want to give you an outline of how we're going to approach this. And I'm going to start with my own story, which is how I got into this whole area in the first place. I'm kind of a second-generation pioneer in the area of financial therapy. And then we're going to go to money types, childhood influences, and then I have 2 exercises for all of you to participate in and share. If some of you would like to share your responses afterwards, I'm sure we'll all be happy to hear them. So let's start with my story. When I was 10 years old, I came home from school and I was sitting in our living room in Old Lyme, Connecticut, and my mother came bursting in the door, and she had a huge smile on her face, and she had found this yellow sweater, and she was so proud of it, and more than anything else, she was proud of the fact that she got a really good deal from it. And I was just so happy to see her, so just smiling. And so we kind of cruised through the afternoon together until my dad came home. And Dad walks in the door, puts his briefcase down, and she runs up to him and says, "Look at this sweater I got." And he looks at her and says, "Yeah, that's nice." And I watch her kind of crestfallen, shrinking down, and then she said, "And I got a good deal for it." And he kind of looked and said, in his kind of judgmental way, "Oh, okay." And she was so demoralized by that and kind of just slumped away, just very, very emotionally depleted. And that scene is scorched in my psyche. And from that, 10 years old, I developed my own half-truth, because my brain was only half-baked then, but a very real one. And that was, I am never going to let myself be in that position again when somebody is going to judge me about money and what I do with it. So as an adolescent, I wanted to be as independent as possible. I figured that was the best way that I could make my own way, and I would develop some kind of job or profession so I could support myself and I wouldn't have to be in that position. So I go through high school, work hard. I go through college, I work hard. And then I decide, because I'm not that good at math, to be a psychologist and not a psychiatrist. And then I started working at Philadelphia General Hospital, which some of you probably have never even heard of because it was raised and turned into Penn many, many years ago. And long story short, I met my husband, who was a psychiatric resident at that point. And I was attracted to him because he was 4 or 5 inches taller than I am. He's probably a little smarter than I am. And he walked faster. So it's true, that's what happened. And a year later, we were married and ultimately ended up having 2 boys, went through our 30s with very solid professions. We were both loved what we did. I loved helping people and just seeing them grow. And it was kind of my golden years then. And by the time we got to the late 40s, early 50s, occasionally it occurred to me that I wouldn't be able to work forever and that I'd have to retire. But it was a very fleeting thought. And it was a fleeting thought because it brought with it a certain degree of anxiety and pain. And you know how those thoughts kind of flee from you when you're anticipating maybe a little pain. Anyway, I walk by my husband's office and I see that the door is almost closed, which was unusual for him. So I walk in and he's got his back to me, and I walk over to him and he kind of turns around very, very sheepishly. And I think, oh boy, what's going on here? So I put my left hand on his shoulder, looked over his shoulder, and what did I see? I saw a tax bill for $25,000 and a due date the next day and a credit card sitting next to the tax bill. Well, I went from being in a pretty good mood to, you can imagine what. And if you were in my situation, you would have probably blown your stack the way I did. And in any case, the upshot of that was that we had to do a little talking. But the most important upshot of that was what was happening inside me, where I thought, oh my gosh, I thought I was free of the childhood influences when I made that vow to be independent and I'd never be back in a situation where somebody else would be controlling the money and I wouldn't have that much to say about it. And I was floored with my own stupidity or my own early home training that so colored what I was doing. And I kind of sensed myself to be like this very industrious little ant who would chase goals. That's just the way I was thinking. And I thought, boy, I'm really making progress because I'm a high achiever and that's what I like to do. And I would go after things and go after things like I was traveling north and I was really going somewhere. And in that split second, what I realized, what I was not looking at was the fact that I was sitting on top of an elephant that was going south. And that barrier to my own success with money, my own, my own vow that I made to myself, that I would not be in the situation that I found myself in. And it really paused my thinking tremendously. And that was a good thing, although very painful. And then my husband and I sat down, and it was clear that he did not enjoy doing the money. And I, being a little bit more pragmatic, thought, okay, that's what I'll do. And finally, maybe I can get into right value with my own value of being independent and taking care of money. So that's what I did. And I found a broker who was a financial advisor who was very, very engaged, very enthusiastic, and very aggressive. But in my learning process, I wasn't sure I thought aggressive was great because we were in the 90s. And if you remember, that was a good way to be aggressive. And it was a good way to concentrate on certain types of stocks, like tech stocks. And that was riding high, and I was learning a lot, and I really loved it until March of 2000. And if you remember March of 2000, what happened? There we go. Down we go. And with that crash, with me being responsible for the money, I felt really awful. And it precipitated a depression that probably lasted about a year. And it wasn't the kind of depression where I was in bed and eating bonbons all day. It was much more that I was just kind of joylessly going along with my life, but not really feeling it. And what happened was, and this is so important, particularly for women, that I was covered with the burden of shame, that I felt unworthy, that I felt like I didn't belong, and I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody about it. It had to be a secret because I was so shamed. And shame, that gut feeling of shame that comes from very, very early childhood, really just shut me down. So I was frightened to reach out, which was the very thing that people need to do when they're feeling that way. But in my language, women tend to privatize their feelings. They tend to take responsibility. Men tend to blame other people or other things, but we women, being so hooked on doing everything we can to be as perfect as we can, we fall short in our own eyes. And that's where the real trouble is. Because if you fall short in your own eyes, no matter how much affirmation you get, it doesn't register. So I was really in a lot of pain because of the amount of money that we lost, because I was so over-concentrated in tech stocks. So this goes on literally for about a year. And then one day I was in the shower and I was looking up at the shower head and I was just watching the water come down and how free that water was. It just cascaded down. And it was so cozy and warm. And all of a sudden, I found myself in tears, sobbing, and that lasted about 10 or 15 minutes. But it was the release that I needed in order to get going again. Because the minute I stepped out of the shower, I said, I gotta stop this. And I did, and I got into gear. And I spent the last, after the Depression, I joined an investment club. I found a very conservative broker. I went in and said, I want to be your most diversified client, because I at least had sense enough not to try to repeat what I just tried to walk out of. And at the same time, I was so fascinated by my experience and what I went through, but I was also locked into it. I thought, well, I've got to be the only one that's feeling like this. And it took me a little while to learn that wasn't true. But anyway, I got in touch, and I had to go national for this because this was such a burgeoning field. It was so young. And I found people who could tutor me in the psychology of money. And long story short, I did that, joined an investment club, learned how to analyze stocks. And in 2009, the Financial Therapy Association was created. And that was kind of a marker for the beginning of this new profession. And just before that, the conservative financial person that I ended up going to suggested that I write a book about my experience. And he said, you know, a lot of other people suffered the same thing. And you know, sometimes you get something intellectual in your head, but it doesn't really connect with your experience and your lived experience. And at that point, I was back enough emotionally. So I thought, oh my God, that's true. Other people must have been doing the same thing that I was doing. And maybe this would be really valuable for them to hear. So that motivated me to write the book, Crazy About Money. And you've all seen it. And if you didn't get an autographed copy, just stay after and I'll do it for you. That story and what I went through has given me the passion to stay with this field and to try to popularize it or let people know that there's real help out there if you feel that you get stuck with money. So I'd like to turn now to the different money types. They're descriptive money types. And I'm going to give, there's 7 of them, and I'll give an example of each one. Well, the first one is a spender. And I think everybody knows what a spender is. They're people who just love the sense of getting something new and shiny, going to a store, the elaborate process, interacting with people, and, it's just fun. And they get a lot of satisfaction out of those kinds of interactions. And they don't think about the end of the month credit card bill. Now, an example of that, and some of these examples are extreme just to make a point, but they're real people disguised. This one person loved to shop. So she would go into a shop and everybody would come running in and want to help her. And she would buy this and she would buy that. And she kind of fancied herself a Christmas tree that could be decorated. And she would walk out with a couple of bags. But guess what? Next day, she'd come right back, do the same thing. And this happened enough so that when she went home, one day she met her husband, and her husband looked at her and said, "You've got all of your clothes with the tags on all over our living room, so nobody can sit in it. You've got them in the bedroom now, and the only place they aren't is on the bed. And now in the bathroom, they're in the tub, and I can't take a bath or a shower. This has got to stop." And she said, "Oh, okay." But she wasn't really interested in stopping. And finally, after he kind of settled down, he said, "You know what?" And fortunately, he made a lot of money. So he said, "I'm just going to buy you a condo and you can use it as a closet." True. Now, the amasser is somebody who gets a lot of satisfaction out of watching money grow, whether it's in a portfolio or in a bank account. But they really just, at the end of the month is fun for them, just like the beginning of the month is fun for the spender. The only problem is that when, say, his wife wants to go out, does he want to go out? He's sitting there calculating how much it's going to cost. Well, it's this for the babysitter and that for the dinner and this for the Uber and blah, blah, blah. And so he's not very much fun a lot of the time. And that becomes problematic. So you can see in a couple, if you've got an amasser and a spender, they're going to be in my, or they should be in my office. The next is what's called a hoarder, and that's the lady over there way on the right. And the hoarder, the main dynamic in a hoarder's psyche is the fear of loss. They're so afraid that money will lose its value that they put it under their mattress. And of course, that doesn't account for inflation and buying power. And it's not very diversified either. So what the hoarder doesn't see that in order to keep that sense of fear low, they'll go 50 miles to get a deal, maybe lose maybe not have to pay $10 more for something. And they don't take account of the time it takes to do that or the money that they're going to save, which is probably not much. But again, if you're so focused on the fear of loss, that's what sticks you down and makes you put the money under the mattress. And I'm sure some of you have seen the hoarding show. That kind of mentality, which is really, it's also very, very difficult to treat, just as an aside. Now the high roller is just the opposite, where the high roller loves risk. And they're the type of person that will go to casino. They'll kind of go in thinking, "Oh, I'm really going to make a big hit. I'm special, and everybody's going to know about it when I make that big hit." And sometimes they do, and they register the big hit and kind of flag it up. But when they have a loss, or when they just don't do much of anything, they don't consider that. That doesn't happen. They're just focused on the wins. And that becomes quite a dilemma, because how are you going to really make an accounting and be accountable? Which of course they don't want to be. They just like the thrill of the risk. Now the money monk. that money monk is a term coined by Olivia Mellon, who was one of the original people in financial therapy. And that is somebody who has a moral sense that money is kind of dirty lucre and they just don't want to have that much to do with it. So they tend to assign the money to either a partner who's more interested, but they like it even farther away than that. So they tend to be people who are teachers and professors, where there's a whole department that will take care of their pensions and their 401k, so they can keep in their minds, their hands clean. Well, you can see the difficulty in that and the judgment in that. When you get detached from your own money like that, you lose control, but they don't care. But unfortunately, that can have significant consequences. Now, the worrier and the avoider. The worrier and the avoider are people who are made anxious by the thought of money, so they don't want to think about it. Well, they can worry about it, they can have thoughts about it, but they tend not to take any action, because to take action would be, they get scared about whether they're doing the right thing or not. So they just kind of keep it at bay. And one story I have about an avoider was somebody who worked in corporate for a long time and made really good money. And then she decided she really loved English literature, and she became a teacher, an adjunctive teacher. And of course, she didn't make the same kind of money. And she was so involved in her teaching that it just didn't register that much how the money was going, until the bills started to come in and flood her living room. So she set up a card table, and she put the bills on the card table, and she watched the bills go up like this. And she thought, well, that's probably not good, but I'm really loving reading this paper. So she continues until the bills start flooding in, and there's no more room on that table, so she has to put up a second table, and that she does. And then when the tax collector or the collection agency comes to the door, then she is very embarrassed, has to let the guy in, and realizes she's in real trouble. And that's when she consulted me. Long story short, her family was able to sell a farm that they owned, and she was able to get a windfall of $90,000, which wiped out most of her debt. So she was kind of sighing in relief. And I'm not sure that taught her what she needed to learn, but if she's got enough sticking power, she will take this situation seriously and be a little more mindful. Now, the money master is where we're all wishing to go. And if you read my book, you'll see that the end result is somebody who is able to live within their means, whatever they are, and enjoy it, and not go above and not go below in terms of how they're living. And they have a balanced attitude, and they enjoy their money instead of worrying about it. Because one of the things that I've noticed is that money doesn't bring a lot of pleasure if there's a lot of worry about it or a lot of stress about it. And there are all kinds of ways which you can have stress about it. So the fact that you can just relax and enjoy it is a sense of empowerment that I would wish to impart to everybody here after they've gone through their stuckness with money and can free themselves from that. Now, I've alluded to childhood from my own experience, and this is a point that's, I think, critically important, that how do kids really learn about money? And most parents use money as a teaching tool, so that when a kid is 4, 5, and 6, they take coins and dollar bills and probably credit cards now to just teach them basic math. And they think, well, I'm doing such a good job teaching our kids about money. This is great. And there is some value in that, absolutely. But the more important thing is whether a home atmosphere is one of abundance or scarcity. So people can have millions of dollars, but they can live as if they don't, and that money is scarce. and they communicate that to their children. Or they can have not that much money, but they're very comfortable with what they have, and they have a sense of joy and comfort in their house, which then translates to a sense of abundance. And unfortunately, children are very, very vulnerable to learning half-truths. So let's take a situation where dad comes home from work. He's just learned that he has a debt that he forgot about. He takes a quick look at the credit card, and there's much more spending in his house than he thought there was going to be, and he's upset with that. There's no food in the house, and it's his turn to cook dinner. So he takes little Johnny, who's 6 years old, says, "Johnny, come on, let's go to the store." They go to the grocery store, and they get the groceries, they're in line, and as they're walking up to the cashier, you know, all the stuff that they have around the cashier for kids. Little Johnny says, "Daddy, Daddy, I see a red car. I want that red car. I want that red car." And Dad is kind of like, "Oh, I'm overloaded already. What am I going to do with little Johnny?" And so he kind of looks and tries to dismiss him. "No, no, Dad, I really want that. I really, really, really want that." And finally he just blows up and he says, "Oh, shut up. You're just a spoiled brat." And I know all of us, I know myself, but all of us have had moments like that. And, you know, one occurrence like that is not to worry about, but it's the pattern. And often when people are stressed, they have that pattern. And if it becomes a pattern, then kids are really, really affected about it. What I'd like you to do is think of the first memory you have, what age you were, how old you were, where you were, who you were with, and what was the situation. And don't worry if you can't fill out all of that. All I'm asking you to do is to get as much detail as you can in order to bring up the feeling of the memory that, and the detail so you can talk about it. Now we're going to put this together with the first part. Do you see a correlation between your first memory of money and your current money type? And if you do, I'd be interested. I think we'd all be interested. If you don't, we'd also be interested in that. So do we have any volunteers that would be willing to share what they came up with?
Hi, I'm Joanna McCraney. I'm a financial advisor. Funny enough. And this really resonates with me. I find it really fascinating. So it's interesting because I grew up with a dad that came from absolutely nothing, and really worked really hard his whole life to provide for his family. Grew up with grandparents who lived through the Depression, right? So I am the person who really finds joy in looking at statements that money has grown, right? Always want to make sure I have like enough money in the bank. It's never enough, right? As you said. And the worrier, like always worried about money. It's because my dad always worried about money. My grandfather just shared this story. I can vividly remember being a child that my grandparents allowed. They lived right around the corner. And my grandfather would kiss bread, stale bread, before he threw it in the trash can. I was like, why does he always do that? So one day I was like, why are you doing that? Like, why do you kiss the bread before you put it in the trash can? He grew up during the Depression, so they wasted nothing. Everything was sacred, right? So I grew up, and I wouldn't call myself a hoarder. I've learned to purge, right? But I don't like wasting things. I don't like wasting food, clothes. My dad says, run your car into the ground before you get rid of it. Never spend more than you have. So like all of everything, that all plays in my head. And sometimes, of course, we always take it to the extreme. Like, maybe I could spend more. I don't like to, but for my kids. Or like, how can we be thrifty about certain things? So that's my money story.
Thank you so much for sharing.
I wasn't going to say anything, but actually your story inspired me because my dad was just like yours. Grew up with nothing, worked really hard to provide for our family. And my money story I thought was not connected, but now I just realized it kind of is. When I was less than 10 years old, oh, my name's Jessica, marketing consultant. Obviously terrible at marketing myself. I was young, and I remember leaving a light on like in my bedroom or something, and my dad scolded, like coming down the hall saying, that's 5 cents right there. You got 5 cents? No, I don't. And I remember thinking like, no, I don't have 5 cents. I probably did. It was in my piggy bank because he put it there. But so that, and you would think, oh, my dad must have always just, been very frugal. But he would spend lavishly on my mom and me and my brother. He would do whatever we needed, take us on vacations, buy us, he would bring home bags of clothing for her. And I think, so I'm a spender, and I can justify anything. Because, it makes me feel good, it's healthy, it's whatever. But I get upset, like when my husband leaves lights on around the house, I do not like spending money on things that I don't see as worth it. So spending on leaving lights on, to me, is an absolute waste of money. But spending for a day at the spa, to me, is like 100% worth it. So I have this weird distinction in my head. I will spend it on myself and the people that matter to me, but I hate those little lights.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Ziegler, I work in recruiting and staffing, but my story's a little different. I remember I was like 4 years old and we were at my grandparents' house and we had what we called the Cousins Club. So there were 13 of us and we would dress up in different costumes and either like go up and have a performance for our aunts and uncles, and we would try to collect money. So we would like send a couple cousins upstairs to like do their thing and then give them a break and then we'd go back up. And with the Cousins Club, you had a choice. You either all came together at the end to do like a pizza party, if our aunts and uncles wanted to do that, or if we didn't eat, or you could save it, and then when you would come visit grandma, when it was just you or just you and your siblings, you could go to Toys R Us and like pick something that you wanted. So for me, I'm a little bit of a spender and a little bit of like a hoarder, like a combo, depending on my mood that day. So maybe it connects, like if we all wanted to band together and be reckless and spend that day together for the greater good, or if you wanted to split it up. But that's the first memory that came to mind with me, was working for it, but then having to decide collectively how we were going to go about using all these funds we took from our parents. So,
Thank you. Well, it's so interesting because everybody has a different take on their memory and money. And it's so fascinating because the individual differences are really, really interesting, and yet there are themes all through that unite us in our trying to deal with money in a rational and balanced way. I think we have time maybe for one more. Oh, good. Okay.
I'm kind of in the middle with a hoarder, worrier, avoider, and I'm now an ambassador. And my speech is about helping people. I could buy anything I want, but do I want to? Food is costing everybody so much money. Food is costing some people so much money. But how many people shop in Giant and pay $25 for a steak and walk past the thing on the side that says flash food? Anybody know about flash food? Anybody know about flash food? There you go. Tell them about flash food. You go on the website, you put your credit card in, no one sees those numbers. The people at Giant customer service, they don't see those numbers. But you can get a pre-made sandwich for $5 that really costs $9. All right, so you're rushed and you've got to get home and you got to make a dinner and you don't know what to do. Well, Flash Food has a prepared microwave meal with the fresh vegetables, with the fresh meat, with the fresh salmon. Half price. You don't need stipulation. Pick it up by 10 o'clock that night. Save yourself some money. Invest in Flash Food. Save the world. One meal at a time. Pass the word on. I don't get anything for doing that. I'm just trying to say, you could say you gotta open your eyes and look at the world. You walk right past the cooler, as big as day, it's advertised in giant. Flash food. It's to save the people.
Thank you for your concern about people, and for acknowledging this flash food that probably most of us has not heard about. Thank you very much.
I think you're all done here.
Okay, so what's the conclusion here? What are you going to go home and work on? The most important thing is to become aware of the elephant that's going south. That's your unconscious when you're trying to go north. And what you want to do is make sure you jump off that elephant's back. And it's a process. It's going to take a while to do that. You know, awareness doesn't come easily, especially if there's a lot of anxiety. But what I recommend is my anachronism here. Is that the word?
Acronym.
Acronym. Yeah, I always want to make it longer somehow. Figure that one. AIR. This is the way you can remember. First of all, if you start getting anxious and feel stuck, breathe. There's a wonderful book called Breath by James Nestor that I would highly recommend, because if you get in touch with your breath, it's much harder. It reduces anxiety. And if you reduce your anxiety, then it's easier to follow the AIR, aware, inspire, and reach out. And I can't emphasize enough the inspiration first of your own self. You know, can you challenge yourself? Can you inspire yourself? And if you do, you become an inspiration and a model for other people. And you can help take them along in going up, going north, without the elephant. And reaching out is so important, because self-judgment and insecurity flourish when you can't reach out and you keep it private. And I would say, under the light of an empathic response, or just a friend being there listening and hearing you, that the value of that is absolutely unbeatable. Because when you start sharing, what you'll find is that other people probably have the same issues, maybe in a slightly different form, but they do, and that will bring you both forward. So if you can help yourself while you're helping other people, what could be better than that? So that's what I'd like you to take home with you. And the most important thing is that when you reach out to somebody that you trust. You know, either a friend or a family member or a clergy person. And if you find that that doesn't do it, you can always consult a financial therapist like me. And if you're interested, you can just leave me your card and I'll be glad to talk to you. So that's about it. Thank you for being such an attentive and engaged audience. I just love the fact that you got so engaged in the exercises. That I will take home and with it a big smile.